Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Durham Select Board meeting here on 2/26/24. We have a full quorum tonight. Why don't we all stand and pledge allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let me see here. Any amendments to the agenda? I see, Jerry, you put the agenda in the order that we were going to do this. You readjusted this. So the original agenda had it switched around, so. Any other amendments? Nope. Okay, public comment? Anybody for public comment? Okay. And old business, we have the 2024 Planning Board recommendations for land use ordinance.
Did you say George was coming?
Yeah, he said he was on his way, yeah.
Okay. I know that,
John is ill. I heard his wife is ill.
yeah, we do know that. I was reading through these ordinances. I can start this off and then we can have a discussion on it. So there was, the planning board, and the town planner, and a number of other folks had gotten together over the course of this year to discuss the housing diversity and density state law that was going to be implemented, LD 2003. They've come up with a proposal at a public meeting about a month ago, back in, I'm going to say November timeframe. They had a public meeting on this, got public input, and they have submitted their proposed ordinance for the select board to look at in relation to housing diversity and density. And also, the second part of this was the Solar Energy Systems Conservation Commission taking the lead on this, looking at all the, I'll say the ins and outs of solar energy and how we integrate them into our land use ordinances. So there's also I'll say a proposal by the boards to include solar energy and solar panels and other types of solar energy ordinances in our regular ordinances for folks to utilize moving forward. So we have some sort of regulation on that. And then the third item that they discussed was set of draft amendments updated to establish new fees and permitting services, the codification of new fees. Again, we had in 2022, the voters authorized the select board to set and adjust fees, so this would update the land ordinance to include any fees that we assess in the ordinances themselves, I believe is how this goes here. So I take it, Jerry, that we are to, we're going to discuss whether to put this into, whether we agree with their proposals.
Move this to town meeting, yep.
Okay. Discussion? I wasn't going to read through the 20-page document here. It was, I did read through it myself, all of the pages and all the changes. I didn't see anything that stuck out at me that was out of line with what I expected based on the meetings in November and what I know about the ordinances.
So I have a question about, I did go to the public hearing where it was discussed.
Yep.
And then I'm very much a visual person. And so when I'm looking at the housing diversity and density, when we went to the public hearing, there were two options, and the planning board wasn't, my understanding was that they were gonna put one option out. And so what I'm wondering did anything change from that meeting? In terms of, one of the questions that came up was, the amount of land needed per dwelling, and there were two different scenarios that they were putting out there. And so I'm wondering if what we're actually putting on the warrant represents only one of those scenarios, and if it's the one that includes needing the 2 full acres per dwelling. And it's hard for me to tell by reading this, but because I really do well. So, I mean, if that's a question, if George is on his way, I'm happy to wait for George to ask that, and maybe if we wanna start with solar.
That's fine, I mean,
since-
this value, I believe, represents 2 acres, 90,000 square feet, spatial coverage and everything that I read, in regards to that, so, so that's what they're proposing, from what I can tell. I don't,
So if someone was gonna do 3 dwellings, they would need 6 acres in order to do that.
nope, looks like the 2 acres right here on item number 8 here, but that's how I read it.
Yeah, the original proposal at their thing was 6 acres for 3 dwellings and 2 acres for a duplex, I think, so.
Could I just make a suggestion that we start with solar and wait for George to get here? Is that,
Yeah, we can take this and table it for now, if we're gonna,
or
if we aren't
can
able to discuss it. Yeah.
we go to part 2? Or
Yep.
Josh, did you have a suggestion?
I was just gonna say we start with the budget if we're gonna wait.
Yeah, we could do that as well, yeah, if we wanna arrange our agenda and start with the budget, and then wait, and if George gets here, we can discuss it. Any
Unless-
doors open? No? All right. I'm fine with that. Yep, all right. Let's table this for now, if we don't have the right folks here to discuss it and to ask questions of, and then we'll, wait, we're gonna hold off here for a second, see if,
Hi, George. I had some
George?
questions,
Yeah.
and we were getting started, so if you wanna get settled in, and then I'm ready to ask you some questions.
Let's roll.
Okay.
why don't you come right up to the table, George?
Okay.
Make yourself comfortable. George Barge, our town planner, joining us.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the questions that I had, I'm a visual person, and I know that when we had the public hearing, there were 2 options that were visually displayed. And there was some back and forth about if it were going to be 3 dwelling units, requiring 2 acres per dwelling, the 6 acres, right? And so I just have a hard time without the visual if this wording represents that.
Okay.
And, because I wasn't clear coming out of that meeting where the planning board was going to go. And so obviously they've arrived at something, so if you could just help me understand that, I would appreciate it.
Okay, do you want me to talk about the detailed language, or you just want me to talk about the policy and the principle? Or both?
Policy.
Policy, okay, good. So basically, the planning board came out after their public process, looking at the comprehensive plan recommendation, which said, get more diverse housing, but protect the town's character. And then they looked at the LD 2003 state law on affordable housing and housing density that took away some of the town's authority to do that. So where they came out with was basically saying the comprehensive plan recommendations indicate adding a second accessory apartment for any single-family dwelling, where right now you can only do 1. But those accessory apartments have to be no more than 50% of the floor area of the main house, and they have to either be attached to that house, or they gotta be in an accessory building like a garage or a barn. So that makes it fit into the characters, so when you drive by, you don't see this 2 or 3 houses all together. So that will not require any increase in lot size. So
Okay.
somebody will be able to do 2 accessory apartments with a single family on a 2-acre lot. So currently, do you want
So
to ask
just-
a question about that part?
Just the one question I had was, is each accessory dwelling unit up to 50%, or the 2 combined up to?
Each can go up to 50% of the floor area. I mean,
So 2,000 square foot house, you can put on, an in-law apartment of 1,000 square feet,
Yep.
and then put a 1,000 square foot, unit above a garage,
Correct.
but you couldn't build
a
2
2,000.
separate
That's
1,000
right. That makes
square
it a
foot.
2-family
Yeah.
or a duplex.
Yep,
right.
okay.
Okay, so,
One quick
Yeah.
clarifying question there, cause I feel like some folks might wonder. So if someone, let's say, doesn't have the space to add it to their house, but then they build a garage expressly for the purpose of putting a unit above there, that's
Mhm.
still okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the other side of the equation is the fact that the state says you have to allow up to 3 full-size dwelling units on every lot where you now allow a single family. So, the planning board, after going through the process of taking some public input, hearing concerns about the impacts of added housing in terms of school enrollments, taxes, larger homes accommodate larger families, theoretically can have greater expenses to the town. So, you have to allow it because it's required by the state, but the state law allows you to increase lot sizes when you add multiple units. So the planning board, after discussing it and taking public input, came out and said that to balance out the increase in housing, if somebody's gonna propose a duplex and a separate standalone single-family dwelling on the same lot, they would have to have 2 acres for each of those units. So that is embedded into the language of this ordinance
Okay.
draft.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So in that example, just to help Heather with visual and think other
Yeah.
people find it useful too. If someone builds a 4,000 square foot structure with the intent of it being 2,000 square foot
Mhm.
duplexes, that now requires 4 acres.
Correct.
And then they can do a separate structure for an accessory. Now, when you do the accessory structure in that duplex scenario, is it of,
So let me
Yeah.
clarify. Whenever you're doing an accessory apartment that is only 50% of the size, meets the definition, it does not require any increase in lot size. Only when you're putting in a full-size dwelling unit.
Yeah.
That doesn't meet the definition.
Yeah.
So if someone were to put in a duplex with an accessory apartment over a garage, that would only require 4 acres.
that accessory apartment over the garage, does that have to be 50% the footprint of
Can be no
an
larger than-
individual
no.
duplex unit or the whole duplex unit as a
The
whole?
individual units.
Okay, so 4,000 square foot
Yep.
footprint, 2,000 square foot duplexes, the accessory dwellings, 1,000 square feet.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Questions?
And there are graphics on the town's website that illustrate
Mhm.
those.
Yeah, I saw those. Thank you, George. Heather?
Where did they land about a duplex in terms of, I think it was like 2.5 acres?
Well,
for a
currently,
duplex?
the ordinance has single family with an accessory apartment, 2 acres. For 20-plus years, however long, the town has required an extra ½ acre if you do a duplex. What the rationale behind that was, I don't know. But, so the principle of increasing the lot size when you have multiple units is already in our ordinance. This just changes that equation,
Right.
based on LD 2003.
Okay.
Any other questions of George on the policy of this?
And I'm
Looks-
pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I just wanna ask here. That still is operating under the assumption that people meet the standards needed for road frontage and,
Correct.
septic setbacks
Yep.
and all those sorts of things, so it's not like if you don't have the space for that, that doesn't necessarily mean you can put the units.
That's right.
Right.
They still have to meet setbacks, but you can't have a greater setbacks for
Right,
these.
right.
Same as single family, they have to have 300 feet of road frontage, they don't need more than 300 feet of road frontage. But, they would just need to require that larger lot size.
Where did they land with the driveway?
There were questions that came up at the public meetings about, well, how do you handle the driveways? And I did provide, there are answers on the website responding to that question. So basically, if you have up to 2 homes served by a single driveway, that can be classified as a driveway. Anything more than that, it becomes a street. So if somebody had 3 duplex and a single-family home on 6 acres, and they had 1 driveway going into that, it would be treated basically like a private way. So they put up a road sign, and each of those would have their address on that. So other than that, if you had a duplex and an accessory apartment with 2 separate driveways, then they can just be treated as regular driveways, and then they'll have the street address on the street. So all the same rules for driveways still apply.
Okay.
And so my understanding is that this warrant language gets voted on. If it's accepted, that's what becomes our standard. But if it doesn't, we revert to the state language.
The town attorney has given the code enforcement officer direction that whenever this local law conflicts with the state law, he has to follow the state law. So as of July 1st, if these amendments don't pass, someone will be able to do the duplex and a single-family home on 2 acres.
Can I just ask a question? Every time we talk about this, I kind of go back and forth. I'm not sure which one I like. Is there any, is it worth discussing something, adding language that says, you know, we just saw it with the property taxes, where the state enacted law stopping the property tax stabilization. Something in here that says, this is what we have, as long as, this is, it reverts back to what we originally had in land use ordinance if LD 2003 is somehow revoked.
Well, law can always be changed, but I don't know that you can adopt a law that anticipates that and puts into an automatic trigger a change
Yeah,
to your
I think-
land use ordinance
I think we
outside of
just
town
have to-
meeting.
We'd have to have another hearing on that and change it, decide to change it back. I mean, there's a lot of these regulations that people have wanted to change for years anyway, so if you open the door again.
I'm not sure that reversion clauses work. in
Yeah, I don't think so.
municipal ordinances.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to.
That's a
to
good
town
question
meeting.
though, because they do change them at the state level often. Okay,
All right, any other questions for George on the zoning for housing diversity and density? Okay, we're gonna move on to solar energy.
Just
We
a
got-
point of clarification,
question.
do we vote then on whether we want to accept that as the language from the planning board at this time, or is that gonna be at a different meeting, and this is just for discussion?
I don't know. Can we vote separately or vote as?
Well, I would
They-
imagine we
they-
would vote on each one of these
They're
separately.
separately, yeah.
Right, but I'm asking if that vote happens tonight, or if this is a vote that
I
happens
don't-
later.
I don't see any reason why it can't happen tonight if there's no other questions about the policy. I mean, they've done their homework, they've had their public meetings.
You know,
We
I
can-
understand.
We can.
Yeah, I just understand
we
that.
We can vote and just say, yes, let's put this on as a warrant article, and Jerry will go generate that article for us.
can I ask one more question then, if we're gonna go to that, like if we're accepting this recommendation and that's the language that we wanna put on? Do you know, George, after I brought up the issue about the driveway in terms of setbacks, if that was discussed? If the,
That
I had
was-
sent that like in
Yeah,
the email.
you were at raising a policy issue of whether there should be a setback for roads from property
And
lines.
driveways,
And driveways from property lines, but the planning board has not had any discussion of that.
they didn't, okay,
No.
okay.
Well, I move that we accept the planning board's recommendation in language.
On the housing diversity and density,
Yeah,
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Josh seconds. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is their final draft. This is what they wanna go with.
Right.
Okay, so if I went to the planning board tomorrow night and made my public comment about the driveway and road setbacks, that's not gonna change this?
No.
Okay, thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate your very
Okay.
clear answer.
Any further comment?
no, I was just gonna say, I've attended most of their meetings on this, or watched them, and seen the public feedback, and it seems like it was really well comprehensive thought out thing, and I think that this is a sound policy and written well, and now it's just up to letting the voters decide if they agree with it, you know, so I think that this is a good holistic approach to give people the option.
Okay, all in favor? All right, unanimous. Housing diversity and density, warrant article will be on the warrant this year as written by the planning board, town planner, and others. All right, solar energy systems, do we have any questions about the solar energy systems? I also read that and seemed pretty solid. I did, I had one question about, did they set up fees in here?
No.
Or
Well,
did we set fees in general?
There
to
is
start things
the
off?
third part, which is the
Yep.
codification of fees, does
Yep.
include solar energy
Okay.
systems. So that would be treated through that and the fee schedule.
So it was discussed, that was all I
Yeah.
wanted to know, was that it was actually
Some,
discussed. and
some
that
communities
we've got
have
some-
done
yeah.
ordinances for this.
Mhm.
We've integrated it with our land use ordinance to avoid another ordinance. So that will be covered through the fee schedule part.
Okay, all right, that's good. That was my question of the night on that. Does anybody have any other questions on the solar ordinances as they're written?
Yeah, I've got a question. I know at one point, and I'm not seeing it in here, at one point it was brought up, someone made a suggestion about, hours of, like construction hours on weekdays and weekends. I know that what I had heard, you know, I've worked in the industry, sometimes you run into blasting and stuff like that, and then we all get phone calls, cause at 7 AM, a blasting crew is going through some ledge.
Yeah, there again, the proposal here is to integrate these regulations in with the rest of the
Mhm.
ordinance. So other parts of the ordinance control hours of
Mhm.
construction for anything.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't add special.
Yeah, no, I was just
Yes.
curious, so that will just
Yeah.
get tied into the existing
Excuse me,
construction
yes.
hours, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions, concerns? If not, do I have a motion?
I have a question. Can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Yeah,
There's a lot of work done here, and I appreciate it. There's a lot of work that was done here. I'm seeing here, the equipment will be placed 100 feet from a property line. And then the visual that I looked at, I think the buffer was, like the vegetative buffer is 50 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then that's on all sides.
It's on sides where a visual impact analysis done by a registered landscape architect indicates there's a need for it. So if there's woods on the side of it, you wouldn't. If it's open road or a neighbor's house, you would. The planning board will do those.
So in the
on-
example, if someone's developing a field and they own 300 acres in the fields, the first
Mhm.
20 acres towards the road, they don't necessarily have to reestablish a vegetative buffer on the back end between
Correct.
the panels in the field and the woods, assuming that no one lives
Yep.
there, okay.
But if you were driving by that, like if
Mhm.
somebody did that in an open field and we're driving by that, would they make them
Yes.
buffer the road driving by?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. 50 feet deep.
50-foot wide buffer. Yep. Designed by a landscape architect to be effective.
And are there, I know, you know, because I've been through this, like, there's the 5-year rule for my landscape plan. Like, it's in effect for 5 years, and then if all my trees die 5 years later, I had it for 5 years. Is there that kind of thing, or is it required to maintain it as long as the field exists?
There is a requirement for a vegetative management plan, first focused on within the solar farm itself. One of the issues is weed control, vegetation growing up causing shade. You want to make sure that's properly managed. But it also includes the vegetative buffer has to be included in a vegetation management plan. So as long as that facility is in operation, they will be required to maintain that buffer. Now, obviously, it's gonna take enforcement, monitoring, but that's like any landscaping plan that you put out there.
Right.
But there's no requirement for like some communities and commercials projects, they require a landscape maintenance bond. but those are really not very effective, so.
Can you explain what happens if the town votes this down?
Well, the concern would be that you have no standards whatsoever. So if someone proposes, and we've had several inquiries, everything from major battery storage systems like you've been reading about in the paper, to large solar farms, 40 acres. So we have no design standards. So the only tool that the planning board has is the conditional use criteria. And without specifics like this to defend your decision, your vulnerability to a legal challenge in the event of a denial or an approval, if neighbors are challenging the decision, is much more suspect than if you have clear standards and they've met all those standards, and those standards address the issues. So I think your community is exposed if you do not have any standards, which is the case. And things like decommissioning is a big part of this. These things have an expected life expectancy of about 20 years, 30 years at the most. And then these things are no longer efficient, and so do they just abandon it and leave that to rot, or are they required to go out and take everything out? And that's what this ordinance requires. They have to have a decommissioning plan. So without that, there's nothing in your ordinance that gives you authority to require that.
This is a question for the other board members. While it's been very minimally represented, it has been represented that I'm not saying that I support this, I just think, we should probably just have a quick conversation about it. Just a ban on them. And as a board,
Say that again?
we've had more than one public comment that the
Some people think there should be an all-out ban
ban.
on solar.
like issue an ordinance that would suggest a ban on, I'm not suggesting that I support that, I'm just saying that has come before us. And so, in the event that the town were to vote this down, what George is saying is that we have no standards to go by, other than the conditional use permit. And so, I'm just wondering, if the town were to vote this down, does it then make sense to have a backup ban question? So that we're not in a situation where the conditional use permit and the no standards to decommission something exists? It's a really big question, I know, that I'm putting out there, but when I'm listening to what George is saying, and maybe people that are here from the Conservation Commission can speak to, like, the pulse of the town and whether or not they think that this is going to pass. If this doesn't pass, the other scenario scares me for the long-term impact.
I don't know if it's necessarily our job to figure out whether we think it's gonna pass or not. I think it's more our job to figure out whether we want to accept the recommendation from the planning board as to let the town decide on this. So, I don't necessarily see it as appropriate for us to say, let's also add a question where if this fails, do you wanna ban solar development? If that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Go ahead, George.
So I wouldn't propose a motion saying that if this doesn't pass, we ban. I would call it a moratorium for a year or two and say, go back to the drawing board, essentially, to the planning board and conservation committee, but at the same time, I think doing the two questions like that just sets you up one way or the other.
That's a good point. Is that, does the select board have the authority to enact a moratorium?
No, what you would do, if this fails, and you're concerned with the exposure of the town, you would want to consider perhaps scheduling a special town meeting, and then have a question for a moratorium.
And I think that when it comes to voting on ordinances, one thing we sometimes always run into is, well, if this fails, what should we do next? And I think that it's better to just use the process we have now, get recommendations, get feedback from the community, have the vote, and then cross that bridge when you get to it. Because we could say the same thing about this other ordinance on the housing. Well, if this fails, should we try to get another ordinance pulled together before that? And I just think that that gets a little, like, at some point, you gotta make a decision on something.
Right, no, I'm not saying
Um,
that I support that, I just
and I understand
don't, I
that-
don't wanna be left behind,
Yeah.
that scares me.
Yeah, but again, I think that that's where we just put an ordinance like this to the vote to the town and let them make that decision. If the whole community stands up and says, we don't want this, we want an outright ban, I think that feeds us information to say, maybe we need another town meeting or special town meeting to consider something like that, but I don't think adding in all the different
Okay,
scenarios of like, well, then if that fails, do we do a moratorium, and then if that fails, do that, so.
So anyway, yeah, I think we need to support what the board's already done here.
absolutely.
And move forward with it and not worry about what the bell curve of the town actually decides. I think the bell curve's probably gonna want ordinances versus not, because it does leave the town vulnerable for anything. So, I don't believe we need a contingency plan for this at all. I think this is a pretty well laid out plan that, puts us in lines with, you know, how our town wants to move forward and closes the loophole that we have out there now, which is the important part, so. Do I have a motion on the table at this point? I think we have a motion already. No?
Do we have a motion?
No, we don't.
We don't. Go ahead.
I'd move that we accept the planning board's recommendation as to the solar energy systems.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Have the seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All right, all in favor in the usual manner? All opposed?
I'm abstaining, just cause I help
We have one
write
abstain.
a lot of it.
Okay. So we have Joe abstaining and four, motion carries for the solar energy systems ordinance to go before the town for vote as a warrant article. Okay. And then we've got the new codification of new fees.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, George.
I'm good.
Okay. I'm just gonna be really, frank, I disagree with the position of listing them. I've looked, and I know that I wish that we also had the letter here from the
I do
attorney.
have it.
Okay, good, I would love to see it.
Yep,
Um,
and just so you know, we talked to him today about it.
Okay, please, tell me what
Yeah.
what was said.
So, just so everybody understands, this
Yeah.
all started with the vote at the 2022 town meeting, if you want
Yep.
to pass those around, to create a separate fee schedule, so that
Yep.
you didn't have, anytime you wanted to update your fees, you didn't have to go to town meeting. So,
Sure.
that actually happened, and then the year following that, the select board got together and started work on the fee schedule.
Yep.
And the select board raised questions in terms of, does it have the authority to enact new fees that that are not in the ordinance?
Yep.
So that then led to requesting an opinion from the town attorney. The town attorney in the highlighted 1 and 2 there says that the select board has the authority to assign a fee and calculate a fee for any fee that is referenced in the land use ordinance. So I give the example of addressing. When the town did E911 15 years ago, however long it was, they wanted people to change their addresses. People don't want to change their addresses, so they didn't hit them with a fee to make them even matter. So they took a policy, no fees for addressing. Well, now new houses are being built, and every time the code officer spends half a day at least, if not more, setting up the E911, getting in touch with public safety, talking to the state, E911, and he goes through a whole process that might cost several $100s, and the town eats that cost now. So the town attorney has said, and we just discussed this today, the town manager and the code enforcement officer and I, that if you're gonna, any fee that's referenced in there, and some are and some aren't, you can include in the fee schedule. If you're gonna include new fees, now obviously if you didn't put it in the ordinance and someone wanted to challenge it, are they gonna challenge it for $100? I don't think so. But he was saying that you're really better off to make sure that it's supported in the ordinance, so he recommended adding this language.
I tend to side with the lawyers.
Okay,
So,
so my
Is there a
question
question?
then is, I'm just gonna use North Yarmouth as an example.
Okay.
The way that they have it referenced is a sentence, basically, that says the select board sets the fee schedule or sets the fees, like that's what, it's not listed out, right? So then when you, and here's my, evidence of that, right? They charge, 3 different fees for a mass gathering. And in their 428-page ordinance, the word mass gathering is not in there, but they have pretty substantial, like, depending on how big it gets, one of them is $5,000.
Do they have a separate mass gathering ordinance?
I don't believe so, I'm gonna look right this minute.
Because they may, and that may establish the fee.
Okay, and so that, and there are a couple of, I don't wanna argue with
Oh,
this,
sure,
you about
no.
this, you're the professional,
Really,
and,
it
you know,
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to me.
in my other examples that I've looked at, I've seen where the ordinance refers to the fee schedule set by the select board and not have it listed out.
That could be.
And that sentence is what meets the requirement of, referencing it in the ordinance.
But part of the problem here is that if you go through the ordinance, you'll see multiple places where it says there is a fee, and that fee will be set by the select board in the fee schedule. So I think it's harder for us to go through and say, oh, even though there's no fee mentioned for street addressing permits or for driveway permits, the select board can do it. Where it says here, certain fees you can, it doesn't say you can for the others. So that's part of the confusion here. So we looked at possibly going and scrubbing all of those and putting in a single statement, but we were really caught up with some of these other policy issues and didn't want to, make all these amendments to all these different sections. Just put the list at the end and we're covered.
So this is everything within our, land use ordinance that mentions there's a fee, plus
And
The addition of
added
solar.
new ones, yeah.
how many new ones are there here? I said we got A through Z.
Well, right now, there's no fee for, let me get that, there's no fee for, several of these mentioned in the ordinance. I'm sorry.
but it gives us an option later.
Yeah,
If we
yeah.
want to establish a fee, we could.
Yeah, well,
so
this
right
would be
now-
establishing.
Right
our
now, there is a
authority
fee
to
for
give-
building, electrical, plumbing, demolition, reinspection, occupancy, after-the-fact permits. There is for conditional use, there is none for subdivision sketch plan. There is for preliminary subdivision, final subdivision, there is none for amended subdivision approval. Site plan review, yes, amended site plan review, no. Peer review escrows, yes. Shoreline zoning, no permit right now listed, no permit fee, excuse me, there is a permit. Solar energy systems we're adding, flood management, there is a fee mentioned in there, set by the select board in the fee schedule. There are appeals fees, graveyard, junkyard, automobile recycling, gravel pit, mobile home park. There is nothing for entrance driveway permits, so every time Calvin issues a new permit with a culvert going in, does an inspection, there's no fee for that. There is no fee for E911 addressing, and there is a fine, actually, there's no fee, the private road has to pay for the sign that Public Works provides. So,
And so I'm just assuming that this list here came from the planning board reviewing the ordinances, you, and then getting feedback from the town code enforcement officer.
there's actually a
about-
code enforcement officer and I that put this list together.
Okay, yeah.
So can I give you a scenario and you tell me how we would handle it?
Mhm.
Let's say that we want to allow food trucks to rent space at the Eureka Center, and we wanna charge a fee for them to be able to do that. How is that accomplished, the way that we're doing this?
Well, first question is, do you have an ordinance for food service licenses? I don't
No.
think you do. If you did, what you would do is probably add that to the land use ordinance, and then add that to the list of the fees. Throw an amendment to the land use ordinance.
So at this point, if someone, I'm not saying it's good or bad or whatever, I'm just asking for clarification. If someone parked a food truck on town property every day to sell food, there'd be no permit for them to be required to do that, no fee, and they just can do it.
Okay, so,
I don't know if that's a
there are,
simple
there
question
are
or.
state
Yeah.
licensing requirements for all food service.
Maybe that was a bad
operators.
example, I was
No,
just,
no, no,
okay,
it's a good
okay.
one. And the thing is about land use planning and land use regulation, it's like, when does a use become established?
Right,
So if they go there for one day, do they need a permit?
Right.
You know, it really, as the town attorneys that I've worked with in the past say, there has to be some permanency to what's being done in order for you to regulate it as a land use. So, but that is probably not a good one, but
yeah,
it just raises the challenge of how do you regulate stuff like that? And where do you draw the lines?
Can I read how they dealt with this? So it says, section 3.7 fees amended 6/19/21. The select board shall, this is in their land use ordinance.
Just point of clarification, you talk about North Yarmouth?
Yeah. And they have the same format of town government that we do. The select board shall establish fees for all permits where permit fees have not been specified within this ordinance. A copy of the fee schedule shall be available from the code enforcement officer.
That language is added to the ordinance, correct?
That's in their land use ordinance.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that may be, that does reference authorization for the select board to
That's what I wanna do.
enact new fees.
I would like to do that for the food truck example, for the mass gathering example, for
Well,
any of the places where fees are not established, to add that type of language. Why is this like eye rolls? What's the problem?
I'm just thinking.
Where this is what we do, we establish policy.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about.
That's an alternative, I just would wanna check with the town attorney.
Yeah, I would run
To
it
make
by
sure
the
that
attorney before
cause
you do
just cause
anything.
they did it doesn't necessarily mean that
I
it
think
passes muster.
if you were asking me how to do that, I would keep your list and just add another subsection that says, and all other permits authorized by this ordinance, not otherwise specified herein.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna make as suggestions, cause I think you know better than all of us with planning, you can't plan for everything, but sometimes the community might want something to be reacted on as soon as it pops up, something new that we didn't expect. And so I wasn't sure if there would be a way to have this set list also then so people know what it is, but also have kind of that caveat in there, like Josh and Heather are alluding to, you know, and anything not listed here that's deemed requiring a permit or something like that.
Two cautions I
Yeah.
would offer is, number one, if you look at the language of the town attorney's opinion, that's what we know we can do, you can do. The other concern I would, just get you to think about is, okay, how far do you take that? So
Yeah.
now are you gonna allow a $2,000 impact fee, school impact fee by the purview of the select board? Or, you know, some people might raise a question, well, how far can you go? Because many
Yeah.
towns have done, Wyndham has a $400 per house recreational fee. They have a council manager form of government, so they can do that at the council level. So just be aware, you may get some pushback in terms of,
Yeah.
wait a minute, now they can do any fee?
Yeah, and I'm also thinking that, you know, the idea of doing this was to get our fees in one place that we currently have established and not get into all the what-ifs of whether Johnny's gonna put a food truck over next door here. I don't see that happening. There are a lot of other things that people can do, and if we get something that's that big, then we need to probably put an ordinance in place and then assess a fee at that point. But to leave it wide open, I'm not sure that I'm all there to leave it open to our purview to add something. You know, in the fee schedule, if you go into an ordinance change, you're gonna go and update the fee schedule. So as you add an ordinance, you update the fee schedule. I don't see why you'd leave the fee schedule open at all.
That's why, the reason I suggested what I suggested and worded it the way I worded it was because it's fees for permits, mentioned or required under this land use ordinance.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't allow for the
Impact fee.
the impact fee.
Yeah.
It would, if it's required, but it's somehow missed and not included in this list,
So it
then
doesn't
you would
take
be
a
allowed
full
to do
year to
it.
go back and say, now we have to,
That,
yeah.
that's the catch-all that is in, 99% of the state statutes.
Yeah.
And so that would be my only recommendation.
Yep.
Because, or if you add something and you're trying to rush it through and you forget to, you add to the ordinance, you forget to add a fee, that's why I would suggest it. I trust that you've done it and you've gone through, and that someone will catch in the future is not added, so to me, it's not a big deal.
Yep.
But that's why I would add it, if that
So,
makes.
just to offer, what we could do is, if you want me to look at that language, a catch-all, and I could draft something up along the lines of what you just stated, and I could run it by the town attorney and see if he thinks, if that is, then you could simply add that to this proposal.
I mean, trying to separate the lawyer part, but if we say for a fee for any permit authorized herein, isn't that what he's saying we're allowed to do? Anyway, so I'm not sure, I mean, you can go back to him, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, because
That's
I get
the-
what you're saying, is you're not saying, we just wanna establish broad authority to write a kickball fee.
So
and
can I,
whatever, but you wanna make sure that if anything's missed, that's in the ordinance, you can say, yeah, we do have the authority to set a fee for that, so.
I'm not suggesting that we have the authority to do all of whatever we
Right.
wanna set a fee for, make an impact fee, blah, 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 I'm not suggesting that whatsoever. What other towns that have this type of language do is hold a public hearing before they adopt their, fee schedule for that year. So if we were adding a mass gathering fee, or if we were adding a food truck fee, or whatever we might, a situation that comes up that we, like the solar ordinance or, you know, whatever, and obviously that's not a good example because we're actually changing an ordinance, which would include a fee, right? There's a public hearing that's held before they adopt their fee schedule, so it's not just a blanket, like, the select board has the authority to do this. I think our fee schedule is so drastically behind what it so a conversation that I've had with Jerry multiple times is that when you look at the way that other towns do things, is that people that are utilizing George's time are charged an hourly rate for George's time, and that George's time working on these things are not subsidized by the residents' tax dollars. This is the type of thing that covers that. That's an administrative thing that Jerry is gonna look at and bring up and go down that road. But if we don't have this kind of language in there, we're in a situation where we can't do that.
But if there's no ordinance, if there's no mass gathering ordinance, how do we charge a fee for a permit when there's no standards? That's my concern with that, with doing that, you know, is there anything, there's no ordinance that regulates the food truck at the Eureka Center, so we're doing a permit, but for what? So that we have a record of who's there? I think there has to be an ordinance to go along with the fee. In this instance, if you wanna say, let's do a mass gathering permit fee, it doesn't have to go in the land use ordinance, because there's no ordinance affecting it. I think that's a different topic, that we as a select board have the inherent authority to do anyway.
Okay, that's a good question. Is that right? Is
I
that
don't know.
true?
I don't know, I'm not a lawyer.
Because that's what I wanna do. I wanna do permit fees. I don't necessarily wanna go write an ordinance to have, for people to be able to have a mass gathering. I just wanna be able to help bring revenue in by having
Point
permit
of clarification,
fees.
so you're saying, we don't have a mass gathering ordinance, but is there a mass gathering permit? And there's no fee structure for that, and you're saying that you wanna be able
Well,
to
I
add
believe
something
we
else?
should have a mass gathering permit, because then the
I'm not
chief
asking what we
is like
should, I'm saying what we
No,
do.
I'm saying we should, because then depending on how big it is, the chief is put on alert that there might be a public
Mhm.
safety type of situation, and yes, that is the type of thing. I mean, most towns, just to walk in the door to apply for a permit, there's an administrative cost of $50 to cover this town staff's time that it takes to process these things that they're doing. We're not doing any of that stuff, that's all lost revenue. That's what I want to address, and that, to me, that's what this fee schedule is. If that's two separate things, then that's fine, we can have this conversation at a different time. If you think it's two separate things, we
I
can
think-
have this at a different
I
time.
think it's two separate things.
I think it's two separate things as well.
So
That's
put a pin in it,
totally
because we're
different-
coming back to this. Please.
Do you wanna put a pin in the catch-all too, or?
No, please
Yeah,
find
that-
out about the catch-all, I think that that's important.
Okay, so what I'll do is draft some language, and if you're comfortable without the town attorney weighing in on that, you can do that. If not, we can get his opinion.
That's up to you, I just,
Do I have a motion?
Well, I don't think we can accept this if we're gonna have George rewrite something, so do you want us to make a motion to not accept this the way it is? Or how do you, I'm not sure what we
Or
need to do
accept it
here.
as is without going back with any clause in there?
You could direct staff to make an amendment to provide a umbrella provision.
I personally would like to do that.
so I'd move that we table the discussion as to the fees, how is it labeled, the codification of new fees until our next meeting.
Okay,
Under the assumption that we get amendment language provided.
Yes.
Second,
okay, all in favor? Table it? Table it.
do you have the direction that you need, George?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
You knew I was gonna do that, George.
Money is always a hard part, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you, George. We got, budget article recommendations. We received a,
And it's also,
there you go.
I don't think you guys got this. Just hand out, just to kind of give you an overview, so the budget committee met and made their recommendations, so what you're getting right now is the only difference between the budget that you passed on to the budget committee to review. Okay, so the only difference here was in the assessing. Budget committee, instead of going with 60, they went with 140,000. And in the Union Church, they took out the 9,543 and made that 0. So that was the only change, just information for now. I thought maybe with those changes, you folks could either agree or disagree and vote for your final recommendations. However, Mark updated the budget workbook to include the actuals. And there was a couple lines in there that I think we need to discuss and maybe increase the amounts.
So real quick, Jerry, where'd the $9,543 go for the Union Church? Was that just summarily taken out? Just a quick answer, yes or no? Where
What's
did
the
it go?
question?
Where'd the $9,543 go for the Union Church?
They just took it out,
And so it's gone.
yeah.
So it wouldn't be part of the money that we would consider trading over, giving over to the Historical District Commission.
That's incorrect. Yeah,
Is that correct?
no,
That's not correct. So the $9,000 is somewhere else.
they just took it out. They just took it out of the line item. They didn't include it.
Can we recognize the budget committee chair, just to have him answer?
Yep.
I believe they increased the fund balance transfer.
Well, they did
Well,
do that, but they
that's-
took it out of the line item in the thing. That's
Okay,
correct.
so-
That's
so-
two separate things.
So back to my question. Is the church still getting $31,000 or not?
Well, that hasn't been decided
No,
yet.
no, meaning, is it in the budget for $31,000 to go to the church? if-
Currently, no.
Currently, no. So all that money is off to the side and we are.
There's 21,000,
Yeah, in their account.
yeah, and you, as a select board, kept the 95 to make the 31 whole.
That's correct.
The budget committee took that 9,000 to not make
They
it.
made it 0.
Right.
Okay. So what they've given back to us is less than $9,500. It isn't anywhere else at this
Right,
point, unless
right.
we decide to put it back in.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay? So the other two documents that I gave you are three. Was a description of the changes that were in the new workbook. You have a single sheet. This sort of summarizes the changes. The two budget workbooks is the one that was done on the 24th with your recommendations. and the changes that are currently, currently in the workbook on the Summary Street. So let me just go over that with you, okay? I'm more particular concerned about the solid waste line, okay? So if you look at this, so the way this sheet works, if you look at it, the 24 budget line adjustments, all right, so line 207354 dues and subscription, we estimated before we did the adjustments 12,000. The actual was 14,166, so I'm now proposing 14,500. The security, we estimated 1,600. The actual came in at 1,728. I'm proposing 1,800. 27,354 dues and subscriptions there. We estimated 600. The actual was 1,280. I'm proposing now 1,500 for that line. The health insurance, I'm not sure why there's a $50 difference, but we budgeted 2225. It came in at 2449. I'm proposing 2,500. Solid waste, this is the big one. So we estimated 350,000. The actual is 361,304. So I'm proposing now 375 for that line. So that's a total of an increase of 28,875 with those adjustments. The rest of the lines, as you go down through the budget, are pretty good. There's not too many, there wasn't anything like this. So I just need to get the board to decide if you like these amounts, or if you wanna change them, just let me know what you'd like them to be. And then they'll have to go back to the budget committee to get their recommendations, and then you'll be ready to vote on the articles. So that's just a little change in the amounts.
I've got two questions.
It looked like Josh had a question.
I think this was a good catch, Jerry. Did the budget committee, the extra 80,000 in the assessing that they wanted to put in, is that what was being added to the fund balance?
Yes,
So they were asking for 580,000?
yes.
I thought we were talking about Jerry's adjustments here before we were gonna go into the budget committee's changes.
Well, it's all to me, it's all relevant, because I think the question for me is, where's this money gonna come from? And so my suggestion to the board would be, I think that taking the other $80,000 for the assessing is a good idea. Because I think that's costing, I mean, it's gonna end up costing some people more money, some people less money in the end with the taxes, but I think it's gotta even out. But I would also suggest, adding to that 80,000, this 28,875. Because I do think keeping the mill rate the same going into, I don't think we'll get the assessing done necessarily this year, but going into that change is something that's important.
So I had a quick question, Jerry, two questions. The over doubling of dues and subscriptions, is that because of additional dues or subscriptions that were added in, or?
They just didn't come in, so we don't pay December's bills.
Yeah,
until we
yeah.
get through January, and I think this is just where it ended up. I don't have the detail of what subscription. they
Yeah,
come
I just
in.
wasn't sure if we added something, or if it's
No.
just, okay. And then the, actual for 2023 on solid waste being, 361,304, and then you budgeting 375,000. Obviously, there's a little bit of not fluff in there, but a little bit of space in there for fluctuation. Do you think that, based off of the trends, should capture it, or is it gonna potentially push the limit there? Cause I'm just thinking we should budget for, what we think it might be.
So their proposal, when they gave us their proposal, they're gonna increase 5% every year, or whatever the consumer price index is for hauling trash, whatever's higher. So if you take the 361 and add that 5% to that, that's an additional 18,000. So it's kind of getting there in the ballpark. 5% of that actual is $18,000 more.
Yeah, so I guess my question
So
is,
it really,
Yeah.
it really is, you know, how, I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know how much it's actually going to be, so. It's one of those where it's kind of a single article. It's better to have the money in there and not need it, and need it and not have it, cause you'll have to go back and ask for it if we run out.
So looking at the 2023 budget, we budgeted $370,000. So this is still less, so it's right around the same number, $375,000, so
we budgeted
370.
less this year than, the year before?
Originally, we've gone into it with less this year than we did the previous year, so, it's,
yeah, and I guess well, I don't guess, my point is that, 5% on top of the 2023 actual would be more than 375. And so my thought is, considering at least budgeting for the minimum, which is 5%, and it's hoping that it's the minimum, the cost index, or the consumer cost index, or whatever, doesn't exceed that. But knowing that it's at least gonna be 5%, I would advocate to bump that number a little bit. Like you said, rather have it in there and not need it than the opposite.
Heather?
Can you explain, I know that last year we did, because our contract is from July 1st to June 31st. And so we split whatever that year and then half of this contract to come up with our number. I'm not trying to make things more complicated, I'm just wondering if you did that here or not.
I did, and in my notes, in my Excel spreadsheet, that number come to 372,000.
Okay.
So, you really, I mean, you're really kind of splitting hairs at this point, because you just don't know. I mean, that's just a difference of $3,000, and I don't know how you wanna kind of nail down an exact price. You can't, so you just kind of have to go with what it is.
Josh, were you gonna say something?
Any other questions for Jerry?
So how do you wanna facilitate this, Joe?
I'm just looking at that now. Well, first of all, looking at the Budget Committee's recommendations, the first one on the list is the assessing. Do we all agree that, that was a good catch, and that we should push that sooner than later? I think the answer's been yes. So, unless there's any further discussion on that, then I was gonna go with the Union Church next.
So do you wanna vote on these one by
No,
one, or
let's go
as a
back, let's
slate?
just, cause we're gonna have to vote at the end on a whole number at the end, so if we can,
Yeah, so the reason I ask is, like, I see the way the budget committee facilitates it, they vote on each one.
No, I get
And so I
that.
didn't know if you wanted to wait till the very end, or if we wanted to vote on each individual change. No.
We'll do both, I just wanted to have the discussion first, so, if that's all right.
Yeah, well, usually you make a motion and then you have the discussion on the motion.
Oh.
And pre-motion questions are just for, information gathering, so
Okay,
that's why I'm asking, just to determine
so
when
if
you
you
want
wanna make a
motion
motion,
made.
go ahead.
I,
I don't know what you make
can
that
I
motion.
still ask a question after a motion's been made?
It
So
depends on what it is.
I just wanna know if the RFP came back on the assessing yet.
No, they're due on the 8th, and we open them on the 12th.
February 8th.
Yeah. We've gotten one so far, but it's not open, I can't open it until the 12th.
Yeah, cause with that answer, I don't know if it's valuable in just waiting to see a rough estimate of what the bids are and then making that adjustment, cause I know that I was at the meeting, the budget committee suggested adding 80,000, operating off, old estimate of $160,000 or 140 something.
The old estimate was right around 180.
Yeah, and so I know that that's where they came up with that number. In their, it seemed that their intent you know, I'd ask the chair who's here to clarify me if I'm wrong, that their intent was to raise enough to cover the entire cost, so we could potentially expedite the assessment process, rather than saying split it up over the next few years. And so if that's the intent and we agree with it, I would think that we would wanna wait until we get those quotes to understand if this is gonna be enough money. Cause if the quotes come back at 200,000 or 210 or whatever, I'd rather see us, if we're gonna try to budget for the whole thing this year, actually have a accurate number, if you follow what I'm saying, cause it sounds like we will have time.
Yep. You'll know what the assessing number is at your next meeting.
Yeah. So with that answer, I would be more inclined to table the discussion on that line until we get those numbers. Unless we just think that it's not worth trying to budget for it in its entirety this year.
Jerry, in your estimation, I know we'll get a number this year, but the likelihood that it will get done within this budget is what? Slim to nil?
Oh, I don't believe it'll get done within this budget.
You're gonna have more time.
You're
to
probably
adjust
looking
it.
at 26,
Yeah.
27, 2026, 27.
And I see what you're saying, is that like, even if they come back and we get that number and we're gonna have to have another town meeting anyways,
Right.
my thought process is we wait for the number that we can get closer now, than if we have to ask for more at the next town meeting, it's less of an ask. Or we could wait and then split it 50-50, the difference, like, I'm just thinking that we're so close to having that number, like we're talking 2 weeks, why not just wait
I
to
don't think
make
there's
that
any harm in
adjustment?
waiting, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's any harm in changing this number when you go forward
Mhm.
and put the recommendations to the town when we vote on that, whether or not we wanna comply with the budget committee or whether we wanna stand on our own number, that's perfectly fine, I don't think that has to be decided tonight.
Yeah.
If we have the real number, then put it out there and say, this is what it's gonna cost us, and make the warrant article the actual number at that point.
Josh, do you have an opinion?
I mean, to me, there's no difference, cause we're going to be waiting anyway. If it were gonna be done this year and we needed all the money, to me, it makes no difference. I think it's better to get this done and not have any hiccups on the budget. We have a month and a half to get it all settled. You know, I'd assume move it faster, but
Yeah, and I mean, my inclination is to talk about everything tonight. My opinion would be to do everything tonight but that number. And so then you're just voting on that after we get the bids. And I'm only basing that off of the fact that from watching the budget committee meeting, it seemed that they were recommending that number to meet the quoted cost. And so if that's what their goal is, and we're trying to expedite the meeting, the town meeting process by being in line with them, let's just get ahead of it, and it's my thought process, so.
Nope.
What?
Is that what the budget committee was actually thinking, is to put it to the number that the actual cost was gonna be, or just to get us close to
By
it,
adding the,
to the assessing?
yeah,
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, we're gonna table that one and get the quotes in.
What? Yeah.
That was
Do
easy.
you need a motion to table, or are we good to just wait on that
We'll
one
just-
line?
We'll just wait on that line.
Okay.
I don't believe you need a motion for that to wait. We're here to discuss, and if we can make a decision, great.
Okay.
Okay, Union Church. We have a, budget committee recommended $0 to be transferred over to the Union Church in regard to the additional money, the $9,543 that was the estimated amount that was raised on the floor last year. Select Board recommended $9,543 to make the town whole on providing that money that was voted for last year. So we have any discussion on this?
I'm trying really, I was there and I really paid attention, I'm trying really hard to remember, and the only thing that's coming to mind, and maybe Milt or Phyllis can correct me, was that the gist was they removed that money because they felt like the Union Church conversation was convoluted to begin with. And so they didn't wanna make it even more complicated. And so I think they wanted to just deal with the transfer of the Union Church and not the additional monies. But I could be remembering that incorrectly.
Okay.
I know that it was Jill that made the comment.
So Milt, why, excuse me, so
Sorry.
why the $0 again? Sorry, put you on the
I
spot.
don't have it clear in my notes, so I'm drawing a blank. I have that, you know, they voted down the repairs, but when I'm looking at the fund balance transfer, I wrote in parentheses includes Union Church. So it seems to me that they're taking the money somewhere else.
Okay,
I'm drawing a blank on it.
Here's
Yeah.
a quick question, can we just look at their total amount from their budget?
Rich, you got a question?
I don't necessarily have a question, but I can see why the budget committee can get, it is a little bit, you know, a little bewildering when you kinda get into it. It kinda goes into the weeds of things, but in regards to that amount of money and the money that's in there, because of the way the question has to be phrased, I would just leave that open-ended question at the end after the $1, just to see if the town will make a charitable donation of $31,000 to the department, the DHS for the restoration of the Union Church,
Right, then it wouldn't show up in the budget.
and it wouldn't show up on the budget.
Okay.
And it just keeps it cleaner than
Mhm.
if we do it, if we don't do it, if there's that, if we.
Right.
So with that $31,000 though, in that situation, there's only 21,000 currently in their account, we would just say, we'd have to raise that 9,000 somewhere.
We don't necessarily, we could appropriate it or raise it either way.
Right, yeah, so so we know we're gonna ask the town for that 9,000, but we're not gonna budget anywhere for asking them for that
No,
nine
I
thousand?
didn't say that, I would just keep it as one question rather than two, and I'd probably phrase it
Oh, I think I'm remembering what happened.
Yeah, you're,
yeah, so the
getting
reason,
gears moving.
you know, this all stems back to the lawyers, you know, thing, but, so the reason for this is, we know we have, the 9,534 was to get it up to the 31,000.
Yeah, yeah,
So to see if the town would appropriate, let's just call it 21,000 of the historical as a charitable donation, and also provide $9,054 raised and or appropriated out of the general fund for a, charitable donation to DHS for the restoration of the church.
yeah, I'm trying,
Okay.
I think at the meeting, Jill was getting at something like that when she made the suggestion, because she was talking about not necessarily being against that 9,000, but being against it being in that section of the budget.
Can I just say why I think it's important to have it in there? And that is, if by chance the work doesn't get done, do we have to keep voting on this every year, this extra $9,543? Whereas if it's in the reserve account, it's there, and, it's not gonna lapse back in to the fund balance. And it'll be there, that for the, I think,
I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, maybe I'm not saying this exactly, I'm putting this as a charitable donation.
Just give
but
us
if the
a-
donation
This
isn't,
isn't gonna
if the
be-
donation isn't made,
The donation is made, it's
Well-
just gonna be in
So
a,
you're saying
So-
no
so I-
stipulation, sorry.
I personally don't think that's the appropriate way to do it with the town's money. Because we're giving them the money, saying we'd like you to use it for this, but there's no strings attached, they can use it however they want. Which, it's not, as I've said before, it's not a lack of trust, it's a,
You're a lawyer,
Where-
deal with this, you know?
I thought we had already established that if we were gonna do that, we were gonna do it as.
which is why I
like,
don't think
Jerry as a
charitable donation is the
custodian.
language I would use, which means if you use charitable donation and then hold it, if it's not provided to them within the 1 year, it lapses back into the general fund, and we're gonna have that same conversation again next year.
doesn't necessarily have to be 1 year. They can have up to 5 to 10 years to do it, it's a
Well-
charitable donation.
Is it though, because remember when we raised it before, if it doesn't get spent, it goes back into the general fund.
That's why I don't, we can be the custodians of it, but it wouldn't be in a municipal account. It'd be in a private account that we're the custodians of.
and we can do that. What happened with I remember every time I bring up the flags, people look at me like, don't talk about that, but I'm just saying, remember when
The town flags.
the fire department flags, and they were making donations to the town, and then that was but that was to the town, not out of the town.
Right, we were making a donation to the town to put flags on telephone poles like we typically do during Memorial Day, and some of them were battered and so forth, so we were actually
But
funding
people were
the
like
town.
writing a check to town of Durham,
Right,
it
where they-
wasn't us writing the check to
Exactly.
a thing, okay,
Exactly.
okay.
How the best way to do that, Josh, I don't necessarily have a clear answer. What I was trying to do is, and by no means circumnavigate the issue, but because of the fact that that money, if we donate it as far as a restoration from the restoration project, it has to be used for public service, and there's no way that this can be, you know, there's no way it can be classified as a public service by giving it to them in the
Yeah, I
context
recall
that we're
your,
trying.
your point on that was that, you know, we can donate to the AMVETS,
Little
the
League,
the Little League, the Scholarship Foundation, but that if we're, the way you were understanding it, as it, the way it was worded by the lawyer is that we would have to agree that it's providing a public service, and then you get into questions about occupancy with no second form of egress, limited parking, limited open hours, and that you were just saying, this would be a cleaner way to give them the money, should the town, and we get the town vote on it. If
I think
that's-
I think it's a cleaner way to give the money with the original intent,
Mhm.
but without, recognizing that it's being used for public service, 'cause
Mhm.
it wouldn't really be used for public service.
Yeah.
That's not the issue I'm taking.
Okay.
The issue is, I think it all should be in the reserve account where this $9,543 should be in with the other $20,457 in the same account.
So
And that way, it doesn't lapse back into the fund
it
balance.
seems like what you're just saying is that we keep that 9,000 in there, taking it from the fund balance and populating the reserve
And
account.
I think you can word it is donate, if you, you know, using the language on the sheet, see the town will donate $31,000, $20,457, from the, current Union Church, reserve account, and the, remaining 9,000. Word it, you can word it as one, but I think I would like, I think,
I think.
and an
by us-
additional 9,
Yeah, and I
putting it
don't,
into that
I
account, so
get it,
that, I just don't want it to lapse. I don't want us to have to vote on this year after
Yeah.
year, because I don't know how long it's gonna take for this stuff to get done.
No, absolutely, and I get what you're trying to say, I
Yeah.
just don't know if that fund balance, as far as quote-unquote, the restoration fund of a municipal fund, could actually be, I think this money has to go back into the general fund for us to give it, because if we give it out of that fund, we're committing that it's for public use, I think.
Right, we talked about that. Have it
Well,
go-
I think if we do it after we've transferred it, and there's no longer a Union Church.
Either way, we got a budget for that 9,000
Or
anyways.
not, but the nine,
Or,
to
I
put
mean, 'cause
1,000
in my,
there.
in my mind, if I'm, and maybe we need clarification from the budget committee, but if they're removing that line, but not decreasing the total amount of money we're budgeting for the year, where are they putting it? Cause if you're saying we're taking that 9,000 out, but we're still gonna spend the exact same amount of money, that means they put it somewhere else in the budget. And so, I just wanted to take a look at their budget and see if the total is just 80,000 additionally, or if it's $70,075 or whatever, so.
Jerry, didn't you say you
Yeah, so your recommendation was 500,000 to use out of fund balance.
Yeah.
Their recommendation was 580, and that was because they added 80 to
And
the
then took out
assessing.
the
And
9,000.
they just took out the 9,000.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where they were gonna
I think
raise
they
that. I
were,
don't know if they were gonna plan on raising that to make the 31 whole, or take it out of fund balance to make the 31 whole. I'm not.
Well, it's
I
not
wasn't
coming out of
clear.
fund balance, cause they would've tabulated that here, correct? It would've said, take
It would've
59,000,
been,
or sorry,
89.
589,000 out of fund balance.
they would've gone 89, 540, or somewhere in that.
Yeah.
They would've used round numbers,
So
but they didn't do that.
Based off what they're giving us, they just remove that line.
Right.
My notes say minus take out right
Yeah.
next to the number
Right.
that I wrote at their meeting.
And so regardless, what I'm getting is, regardless of where we put the dollars and how we facilitate that to the Union Church, we should still budget, if we wanna do that, we should still budget for that money, kinda like what Josh is getting at, like, at least,
Yeah, maybe a
Yeah.
fact is we're budgeting it, and we're making a recommendation, excuse me, I can't talk tonight. We're making a recommendation of $9,000, and the budget committee is simply making a zero.
and that's 100% fine, and then the town can vote whether they
Right.
want that to be taken
That's-
care of, you
That's
know?
not uncommon.
And I mean, I know that we wanna, sorry, being as in line with them as possible, but if our budgets are only off by $9,000 and because of one budget line, that's giving the people the power to make the decision on whether they want that or not, so,
No,
I mean, we could just say, keep it in,
No, I agree.
and then we gotta figure out all the fun where it shuffles or lands, so we avoid last year's.
My biggest
Debacle.
thing is not whether we give the 9,000, don't give the 9,000, I mean, that's, I could be persuaded either way on that, it's just,
Yeah.
making sure we word it appropriately, cause I do think that one can come back to bite us.
Yeah, I think that's almost a little bit of a different discussion, whereas here we're just saying, do we still budget for the 9,000 or not? And then we can
Right.
figure out how we
I don't-
word
I don't
that
mind
with the-
which way we go with that.
Yeah. The only, Joe, if I can make a comment elsewhere on the budget, the only thing I would be is, I know it seems a little annoying, probably for Jerry, for me to see that 375 number, but I was gonna recommend for the solid waste going up to 380, which does capture the 5%. Now, I know that's 0.04% of our budget, but I just like the idea of that precedent of if we know it's gonna increase by 5%, or the index, to just budget for that 5% until we see that the index is higher or lower than, they're never gonna charge us less than 5%, you know?
Right.
So,
let me just
you can shoot me
clarify.
down, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
I just wanna make sure, so when I did the math with the new contract and did the 6 months of the old and 6 months of the new,
Mhm.
using the exact same tonnage amount, it came to 372.
Okay,
So,
Right.
plus I looked at
So,
that
yeah.
so then I looked at that 5%, that it's gonna go up in the next 6 months. I'm like, well, 375 seems like a good number.
the reason I get the 380 was cause I did 361, 304, plus 5% of that, and that brings me to 379, 369.20. And
Right.
so then I said, round up the $631.
I get it.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know if I did that math wrong, cause you're saying you
No, I
already.
have the same numbers
Yeah,
that you did, yeah.
One more comment? Go.
I don't wanna speak about a part that we're not speaking about, it's on this page that I have something to say, but it's not until we get down here, so do you want me to wait until we get down here, or are we just like putting it all out there right now?
Are we all set on Union Church? We're all set on that? We're all set on assessing? So was there anything else on this page that Jerry gave us?
On my notes, I have 16,700 written down under community services. And when I go back and I look in the budget, I think it's the $600 for general assistance, and that's not listed in this for the 16-1. But in the book, there's $600 there for general assistance.
Yep.
And so this number, it says 16-1, not 16-7.
I see what you're saying,
Yeah, but it's not really a donation though, is it?
Well, I think I'm asking you, because
No,
in the
I think
book,
it's two
if you look
separate
on page
lines.
13, right, the total is 16.7, it says outside organizations
Yeah.
16.1, and then 600.
Yeah.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Well, that's where,
yeah.
my question, cause it says here on our supplemental, it says 16,100, page 13, line 69,7807. And then when we come to 69, line 7807, yeah, it still says that, but we're just not adding in that general assistant on the supplemental
Because
sheet.
it's not, general assistance isn't really a donation.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, so,
Right.
yeah, it's still budgeted
That's
for
why.
in the total, but
Right.
just being categorized as something
Yeah.
separate from,
Right, it's in a category,
Donation.
right.
Okay, got
or
it.
yeah, cause that category is outside organization.
Right,
Whereas, okay.
right. Yeah,
Thank
All
you.
right,
yep.
So what I heard is we're gonna wait for the assessing estimate to come in, see what that is, and then adjust this number and vote on that number at the next meeting. Union Church, we didn't get to a final decision on that, other than consider just putting up each separate number for select board and budget committee. And then I got a proposed number for solid waste to estimate that at, either go with the proposed now, $375,000, or make that $380,000, which,
So I think what might be the best for, to go through systematically, just go through each of Jerry's line changes.
Yep.
And just have a motion and vote on each one. And then whatever we wanna table, we can, or if we can't, we just go with it.
yeah, I was trying to get through what the budget committee had changed first, and then we'll go over here, but we're all set with what the budget committee did, all overall.
Are we gonna
That
have
first
a
page?
vote on that, or?
Just making sure we're all set with that, and then we can go down each one and vote on that, yep. All right,
Jerry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In this booklet that says as of 2/5/2024, these changes that are on this sheet are reflected in here.
Exactly,
So what, can I just make a suggestion? Is that okay? What I think we should do is just go article by article and vote to accept the new number or not,
yeah,
based on,
I'm actually thinking that I want him to put these in the spreadsheet and send it back over to the budget committee for them to.
Well, don't we have to
Well, I see.
adopt
Yeah,
it
no, I'm just
first?
thinking, yeah, we do have to adopt it first, I guess.
so the way that,
But it's gonna be held up because we don't have all the numbers, so we're gonna be to next meeting. I'm just thinking that we wait till next meeting to vote on this.
Well, why don't we just vote on everything, we go through on everything, and if we get to something we wanna table, we can, so then we have one thing to do next meeting. And we can vote on the rest of this while it's still fresh in our minds, rather than having the same exact conversation next meeting.
like if we went through and I said, I make a motion to accept the administrative budget of
that's fine.
$473,656,000.
Yeah.
Go, say that again?
I make a motion to accept to recommend, is that the word you want me to use? The $473,656 for the administration budget.
Second.
A motion and a second. You said for 400 and what? See, I don't, my problem is I don't know what
It's on-
line I don't know what line I'm looking
Page,
at it right
page
now.
6.
Page 6 of Jerry's new budget,
Of the 2/5/2024?
right,
Yeah.
and it's page 6, and then that
Okay.
number that I just said reflects the 14.5, which is the change to the dues and subscription line.
Yeah, we're pretty much just voting to accept Jerry's highlighted lines
That
in that
includes all-
section.
In just the administration budget?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Heather motioned and Joe second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right, motion carries.
So I'll make a motion to accept the municipal buildings budget of $22,435, which is on page 7 of 15, to reflect Jerry's change.
Second.
Okay. Motion on the table, 22,435 for municipal buildings. Any discussion? I have a second, sorry. All in favor? Okay. Motion carries, unanimous.
So if there's no change, we can pass over? If
That-
that recommendation doesn't change?
That's what I would do.
The assessment budget didn't change, so we can pass that one over?
Assessing budget didn't change. That I don't know.
Yeah,
Are we allowed to just go?
yeah, we're not
Yeah.
changing, we're not changing it.
Yeah, we're just voting to accept or reject Jerry's changes.
All right, that's fine. fine. That one's all set.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend $124,500 to the planning and codes enforcement budget.
Second?
Okay, got a motion, planning codes for $124,500, and a second. All in favor? Okay. Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Anyone else wanna jump in on this motion making? Alright, I don't wanna
You
take all
guys,
the
you guys
fun.
are doing great.
You guys are
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, just have at it.
Alright, I'll move that we accept the fire department's budget of $603,854.
What was it?
Wait, that's
Yeah,
not the number.
That's not the number.
Yeah, it's 603,854 on page 9 of 15.
No,
That-
45. I'm not trying to split hairs with you, it says
No, no.
45.
Right here.
Yeah, 45, not 54.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's okay.
What did I say, 54?
Yes.
Everyone's gonna think I'm trying to get Chief $6 more. $9.
I was trying to split hairs.
I thought I was gonna get you on that one.
I'm sorry, I just like it to be
Second.
accurate.
You got a second
Sorry,
there,
I'm
Josh.
sorry.
What was
That's
that number?
$603,845. A motion, second for the fire department. All in favor? Unanimous.
Alright, I'm done.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion that we accept the solid waste, budget of $394,000, so change that 375 to 380 in the hauling line.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, how much was it?
Make it 380, so
That's
394,
fine.
394 total.
394, thank you. All right. Do I get a
Second.
second?
Yep.
Heather seconded. So I got a motion on here for solid waste for $394,000 even. Motion and seconded, any discussion, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay,
No, you got that.
I make a motion that we, increase the, addition to the fund balance. It says here 525, but I would make it, $533,875, based on what we voted on tonight.
Point of, sorry, I'll wait for it. I just have a question on that. So we only just voted to increase by $5,000. Why would we increase the fund balance transfer by $8,000?
Because he only increased it 25,000, but we just increased the entire budget, $33,875.
No, cause that 525 already reflects your increases, correct?
Yes.
So if we voted to just accept everything Jerry did, it would be 525, but since we voted to accept everything plus 5,000, that should just be 530.
But
That's,
you're
so,
not doing anything with assessing, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
so, when I look at the budget from, where it says as of 1/24/24,
I'm looking at the 2.5.
I understand what you're looking at, but what I'm saying, my motion is based on, here, you're looking at the mill rate of 21.348 with a $500,000 fund balance, use of fund balance. You come up to the 2.5, the 525, the mill rate goes up. And what I'm suggesting, recommending, moving, is that it stay the same, which is why I would make it the 533,875, because we didn't take any money out of the budget, right? But what we just voted on was to add $33,875 to the budget, correct?
That's where I'm losing you, cause when
Which-
my understanding, and I could be completely wrong,
Based on what Jerry handed us, the line adjustments,
we
the
voted.
total increase is $28,875.
Yeah.
And we added 5,000 to that,
Mhm.
so the total increase of the budget is $33,875, right?
That makes sense, I'm just
Okay.
wondering why we only have 525 out of the fund balance
Because he
right
put
now.
525 in there, we had it 500, I'm suggesting we do the 500 plus the 33,875.
So it was 500 before we made the yellow highlights.
Yeah,
That increased it by 28,875.
Mhm.
But adding 25,000 makes the tax levy still 0%.
so I'm sorry, my assumption, which was wrong, was that you were increasing, all your increasing of the budget was gonna come out of the fund balance, but it looks like you just only took 25,000 out of the fund balance, and the other 3,875 would be raised,
Right,
okay.
well,
And Josh is saying, let's just take it all out of the fund balance.
Well, you raised more tonight than I have in here, cause you added more to the,
Right,
To-
but that
to
$3,000
the salary.
ish difference, and Jerry raised and Josh is saying transfer.
Yeah, that's, I'm following now, yes. I was just, yeah, I get it.
Okay, I'm gonna second Josh's motion, if somebody didn't do that already.
I was
Okay,
just asking
so,
clarification.
so discussion, I did not follow the math, so I don't
Yeah,
get,
I'm having a hard time.
I'm really
So-
confused, so I just.
So let me try one more
This is
time.
why I
Let
wanted
me-
Jerry to go and
let me try
review
one more
this and
time.
send it to us, because I wanted everything on a piece of paper before we
I-
voted on it.
So, we started, the budget we approved previously called for $500,000 from, a
Right.
use of $500,000 from the fund balance.
Yeah,
Jerry's number in this updated budget included an additional 25,000.
what's that include on this list already?
No,
Jer-
don't look at this list yet, okay? Just in the fund balance on page 1,
Yeah, but,
the additions to use of fund balance. Initially, it was 500,000 that we approved. Jerry's proposal tonight was 525. I'm saying we've raised that $33,875, the total budget, and we should take that money out of the fund
so,
balance.
Right, but I don't know where the 525 came from, that's what my.
So
question
Jerry
is.
increased spending to adjust for actuals by $28,875.
Right, all
And
the
then when you
all
look
the
at,
yellow, all the
when you
yellow
look at the front
bars.
page, he said $25,000 of that increased spending should come out of the fund balance. So that caused the fund balance to go up to $525,000. That still leaves $3,875 unaccounted for, which Jerry says we should take out of the property tax levy. So if you look at 2/5/24,
So-
property tax levy is $8,030,885, as opposed to on 1/24, it was $8,027,010. And so Josh is just saying that all adjustments based off of actuals plus what we just added should come out of the fund balance, so the mill rate remains the same.
Instead of raising the difference, just transfer it all.
And so Jerry's budget, he also increased by 0.3% the deficit, the funding sources.
The tax levy.
Right. And so I just think that should,
Yeah.
and there was an increase in the total funding, which is why he had the difference, but I'm still advocating, because we're talking, I just like to make it a wash,
Yeah. I'm with you.
just. And at this moment, I could care less.
So I seconded Josh's motion.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
I agree with Josh's motion, so I'm good with it. We've done the math there, so just wanted to make sure we clarified it.
Okay. All in favor? All opposed?
so what is the fund balance now that you're using?
533,
I actually
875.
don't know.
533, 875.
Okay,
So everything you propose for total increase, plus the 5,000 that we increased on top of that,
okay,
is to come out of the fund balance so that the mill rate doesn't change.
right. The mill rate in that 0.0 at the tax levy limit, that's, we wanna keep that at 0.
So yeah, that would still stick at the 124 number of
But
21.
we're still gonna have to vote on this again for
Yeah, oh, yeah.
$40,000.
And so,
So my point was, is that we
You-
didn't have to do this tonight, we should have done a regular straight piece of paper that had all the numbers and voted on at the next meeting.
Yes.
But that's my point.
and I'm not gonna
Leave it
be
at
at the
that.
next meeting, and so, I would urge the board at the next meeting, to, if the board's going to vote to increase the
Assessing.
assessing, I would also urge the board to take that money out of the reserve, the fund balance.
So the way we've done this now is when Jerry comes next meeting, we'll have our entire budget, and then voting whether we just add that 80,000 or not, as opposed to what we did tonight and the 80,000 being worked into the conversation, so it kind of segments it. And I think it's be a little more streamlined that way.
Well, you'll also hopefully have the budget committee's
Yeah, so-
recommendation, so
Yeah, according to your timeline, the budget committee has a date reserved for a third meeting to now review these numbers.
right.
So I'm gonna ask, when I asked them on their availability, that it looked like most people could make a meeting unless unless the town won't allow it, was from the Monday before your meeting, but there's a holiday. I hope that doesn't exclude us from meeting that night.
President's Day. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to be
Most of my
there.
members, if
No,
not
it's
all,
not
said they
employees.
were
Oh, yeah.
available that night.
On which night?
Wednesday, your meeting is the.
The 15th, we
Is that,
decided
no,
on 15th.
is that a state holiday?
Our meeting is, our meeting is the 13th.
Monday's the 13th, so that's not a
Tuesday's the
holiday.
13th.
I'm sorry.
The 19th is the
And I
holiday.
was to be on the 12th,
The 12th is this Monday,
okay.
yes.
So I'll get an email out right away,
All right.
that we'll meet this Monday evening.
Gonna say, we're off.
Oh,
That would
the
work
13th.
good.
Yeah.
Can I just, we can only open the bids on the 12th, and we don't meet until the 13th, so we wouldn't be able to,
But they can make a recommendation and then we can, so I think we ought to send this number to the budget committee for that day, then they send us the number for the assessing that they want, and then we say that number or the,
Cause you'll open those on the 12th, Jerry, right?
Yes.
And so when they meet, you can say, these were the quotes we got, and they can do whatever they want with that
Right.
information.
I can let them know.
So on the 12th, they're
Absolutely.
voting to agree with us on this, either reinforce their $80,000 line for the assessing or increase or decrease depending on the quote. So then on the 13th, we're getting their recommendation based off what we've already done and their updated recommendation on the assessing and deciding whether we agree with that or not. Perfect.
Okay. All right, we have any new business? No?
I don't know if it goes in new business. I just, or if it would be more of a board member thing, just looking at my personal schedule in our March, and I didn't know if we could talk about maybe adjusting one meeting. I've got called out of state for 2 assignments, and they both are on the week of the, select board meetings. So I don't know if that's a new business discussion or a board member report discussion.
so our meetings do you wanna discuss this now, or do you wanna?
Yeah, March, we're pretty much set,
We're,
so.
yeah, well, all of our meetings are
Yeah.
set for the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday of the month, but I have to go to Massachusetts for a work trip the 11th through the 13th, and then Grand Rapids, Michigan, the 24th through the 29th. So we don't have to move a meeting just because I can't make it,
Yeah.
but I know it's budget season, it's leading right up to right before a town meeting. There's no opportunity for me to, we don't have a policy in line for me to Zoom or Teams in for a meeting.
No.
So, you all can do the meetings without me, I just saying that I won't be here, and if it's not too inconvenient for people to shift at least one of those meetings as we prep for town meeting, I would appreciate it.
I don't have a problem moving.
so my only issue is that my wife is scheduled for trial. I'll know for sure, I think, next week, when it is, so if you,
I mean, we can talk about it next week and put it for our next, we have a meeting next week, but I just wanna put it on people's radar. I know that we don't need to move a meeting just cause someone can't make it, but with it being so close and then 2 in a row, I just wanted to throw it out there, so.
I couldn't remember the
All
date.
right. Thanks, Joe.
When's this time? We have.
Managers report, Jerry, you have anything to report this week?
Yeah, I just want to let you all know that most of the efficiency main lighting is in. They just have a few outside lights to go on the Eureka Center. They had trouble mounting, taking the old lights off, the wiring and everything fell inside the walls, so they had some stuff to do there. But hopefully that'll be done and wrapped up Friday.
Okay.
The only other thing I got that I wanna just publicly thank the budget committee for doing their due diligence and looking over the budget. And I thought the meetings went really well. And I really appreciated the board being there to help answer the questions, cause it's, you know, that's important. I just wanna thank Bill, I thought he did an excellent job running the meeting, cause budgets and money can throw some passion out there, and sometimes it can be difficult to, get your hands around, so, Bill did a great job, so.
Mill runs a tight ship
Yeah,
over there.
he did good, so, that's about all I got, everything's running good at the office, it's busy. Absentee voting is happening, Jessica's got a good handle on that, and, that's about it, yep.
Okay, thank you. Heather?
I know that we've had one person turn in papers for, the election, and I'm just wondering if, I know that we ran last year, they did the blurbs about the
Yes, we
candidates
already
that
did
were
that.
running, I was just wondering if
Candidate
they were gonna do
bios.
that,
Mhm,
okay.
yeah.
And I think, if I remember correctly, it was a resident that, set up the, meet the candidates. That wasn't done by the town,
Yeah, because
Correct.
that would be,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
if you guys wanna do that, yeah.
okay.
We used to, way back, before I was even on the board,
That's
We-
way back.
way back, so 7 years ago, and then some. The previous board, prior to me getting on it, would have the candidate come in before, and each candidate, we'd allow them a minute or two before, and during the select board meeting. For the select board members, and the budget committee, I don't know if they did the same thing, but as far as the selectmen, we did do that in the past.
Do you know why they stopped the practice? Just,
Mostly because every time somebody ran in the past 6-7 years, there's only been a few changes. So it was always, and it was also, case in point might be this time too, it was also, sorry, I really can't talk tonight. Uncontested, it was just one candidate.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to give anybody running the chance to,
Yeah, no, it's not,
Speak here.
especially if it is a contested, I think, my first time, I think it was like, everybody, there was 2 of each for everybody, so there was all kinds of people running, so. If there's just one candidate, then it's pretty much a lock.
There are candidates for other boards besides ours though, correct?
Yeah, we just did the select board, we never, that previous board, not we, I wasn't part of it, they just
Right.
did the select board.
But we have people who have turned in papers for budget committee and for school board? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, board members report, anybody have anything to report out that you've been to, like classes or anything, or MMA, or, no?
no, I was just, oh, go ahead.
No, you have something you attended?
No,
You have
I
to
just
report
know
on?
that in the past, we also used this as suggested agenda items for the following meeting.
We could do that.
Yeah. I know that we sent in our comments 6 weeks ago for the policies.
Yep.
And so getting that on the agenda shortly would be, I
Yep,
think, a good idea.
I am gonna finish that up. Actually, my report this week will have to do with that. So, you good? All right. So, I went to Fostering Civil Civic Dialogue with a number of chairs in surrounding towns, held by GP-COG down in Portland, out their Portland office, last week or the week before. All the weeks blur together. So it was quite interesting hearing, Durham's quite unique right now. We don't have Zoom, and our meetings are quite civil after listening to these folks from people like Scarborough and Bridgeton and other areas around the state. Scarborough has, for instance, 2 political action committees that show up at every single one of their select board meetings and proceed to take up most of their meetings with public comment and other input. The 2, I'll call them factions for lack of a better word, don't like each other, nor does one of them like the select board at all. So it's quite an interesting little meeting that they have down there, as well as the Zoom that they've allowed in a lot of these towns. They've been bombed so badly that, they have to have somebody there at the shut-off spot because they get anti-Semitic remarks and other remarks that are just not called for in any public meeting or forum. So the lawyers put this presentation on for GP-COG, two young lawyers put this on. They basically came down to, which was quite interesting, and this goes back to part of regulations or the bylaws that we're putting together, is that, you know, First Amendment rights stand loud and clear. Anybody can stand up and say anything they want. I mean, anything. Short of, and I'll use the word, putting child porn up on a screen in front of the people, they're fine to go just about anywhere with anything they have to say at any time, anywhere, including board members. And it was quite interesting to hear the lawyers talk about how they have a number of cases where you can't kick people out, you can't stop them from speaking their piece. They can do just about anything in this public space. The chair can call order, and eventually, if that person is out of order, the chair can have some decisions to make. But it's not anything you want to write in an ordinance or a rule or regulation that we're going to go and actually quell First Amendment rights of people. So we need to be careful when we write up these bylaws that we don't infringe on First Amendment rights of anybody. So they can't be too restrictive. The 3-minute rule, everybody has the 3-minute rule. Although some towns do an hour of 3 minutes in the beginning and then an hour at the end because they run over on the number of people that want to stand up on the podium. I don't see that being a problem here in Durham, but it is something to think about when you say that you want to have, like, say, public comment on every single item on the agenda. It's not necessarily recommended by the lawyers to do that. You'll be there all night, every night. And holding the meetings to find 9 o'clock, we're done, take a vote if anybody's gonna go any further, and, you know, end the meetings if you have to and continue it at another time. So it was quite eye-opening to see, as these towns have said, hey, let's bring everybody in, let's turn on Zoom, let's have this open forum, how it's gotten out of control very, very quickly. And some of the smaller towns have the same problem. Bigger towns have bigger issues, way bigger issues than I hope we ever see. But it was a very eye-opening meeting to hear this, hear these people basically spell out what they go through at every council meeting and every select board meeting. It's quite horrifying at times to hear some of the stories they have, so. So keep that in mind when we're going through this. I will have that, I plan on doing that this weekend, getting that off my computer, and then I can finish that up. So I was waiting for that meeting to occur to get back to it, because I knew there'd be some very insightful things for us to kind of think about and bake in. We can get that presentation. They didn't hand it to us. They just showed it up on the screen, but we can request it if anybody's looking for it. I know Jerry can reach out to Christina for that presentation if somebody wants to breeze through it. And we do have access to the lawyers, although our lawyer's just as good. He understands First Amendment just as well as anybody else and can explain to us if we have any questions. But it's something that, like I say, keep in the back of your mind, do some research on it, and I'll adjust some of the wording to make sure we don't try not to step in that. And you know, recommendation would be, you know, think hard about whether it be this board or a future board about allowing Zoom in these meetings. It's completely horrifying what goes on at these meetings, and so disruptive too. But even if somebody held, like if Milt sat there, and no offense, Milt, I'm gonna make fun of you here, or use an example, if he held a big sign up for his need or want, he could sit right in this first chair right here and hold this big 5x4 sign up in front of us the whole time, and we could not remove him. We would have to conduct the meeting around somebody like him sitting right there in front of us with his.
Thanks for the idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea, isn't it? Yeah, but, you know, so it's interesting. It's like I say, it's kind of scary when you think about it. But we go, yeah, you could call it dollar sign up. But anyways, that was my 2 cents for the night. Okay, consent agenda. I have the motion to accept the consent agenda and minutes from
So moved.
23.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion, all in favor? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Upcoming meetings, select board meeting on 2/13 and 2/27. Budget committee, you're meeting Monday, hopefully, Monday evening on the 12th.
Carol, we'll have select board representation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Planning board meeting is on 2/7. Here, these are all at the fire station. Do we have a reason for
Thank you,
executive session this evening? Thank you, Milt.
I'd like to just go in real quick in an executive session, talk about a personal matter. It's only gonna take 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. I'd move that we go into executive session to discuss
Personal,
Personal.
605A, yeah.
matters per MRSA 4056A. Seconded by Joe, all in favor? Okay, unanimous, we're going to executive session. That closes our public meeting portion of the meeting. Thank you all.
Oh yeah, figure out how to avoid hot mics during the executive session.
Whatever, yeah.
Just walk down the hall.
Yeah, we can.
I can send it to them.